Well, good morning, everybody. Actually, it's afternoon, but this is Hungry Hearts Church of Jackson. I'm Elder Barbara Dickerson. I'm going to be speaking today about Ruth and pretty much why she's an important person in the Bible. So, with Ruth, you know, she was a Moabite. And if you remember anything about Moabites, it was in Genesis 19:29 through 38. Moab was the product of incest. So there was a history of defilement in her lineage. So, you know, when you're out there looking at people and you think they're creepy or they're this or they're that, and you're judging their outward appearance or maybe their skin color or something else about them that really doesn't mean anything, you should think about Ruth. Now, Ruth was actually from this book is taken from the time of the book of Judges. The nation of Israel is in anarchy, chaos, and apostasy. This story happens around the time that Gideon is one of the judges of Israel. The romantic love story centers in upon a woman named Ruth. Ruth was not Jewish, but a Moabite who had married a Jewish man. Her ancestors were from Lot's line. The Moabites were birthed by Lot having an incestuous union with his eldest daughter, according to Genesis 19:30 through 38. The son born of this sin was Moab. The Moabites were into cultic worship of the local deities and practiced Baal worship. Fawcett's Bible Dictionary says of Moab that it means from father, i.e., the incestuous offspring of Lot's older daughter, near Zor, S.E., of the Dead Sea. That's the bibliography of that. Now, in Deuteronomy 23:3, it says, "An Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord, even to their 10th generation shall they not enter in the congregation of the Lord forever." Because they met you not with bread and with water in the way when ye came forth out of Egypt, and because they hired against thee Balaam, the son of Beor of Pethor of Mesopotamia, to curse thee. Now, do y'all remember that story? It had the donkey in it. Okay. So, you know, pretty much in God's eyes at that time, these were not people he wanted his people to be associated with. And we know people like that. Oh, you don't want to associate with them. They're just not good people. You know, we're here in the South. We hear that stuff. I've never lived in the North. I may sit up there too. And they probably do, just in a different way. You know, we'd say, bless their hearts. You shouldn't. So I mean, you know, they were looked down upon. So you have to ask yourself, why did God suddenly decide that he was going to let this woman into the lineage of his son, Yeshua? Well, I would be willing to guess that she was past the 10th generation. That would be the biggest thing I would say. Okay, she's gone past the 10th generation, so that, you know. All right, John 8:44. This is, ye are of your father the devil, and the lusts of your father ye will do. He was a murderer from the beginning, and abode not in the truth, because there is no truth in him. When he speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar and the father of it. Now, he's speaking about the Moabites. And then in Psalms 51:5, again, behold, I was shapen in iniquity, and in sin did my mother conceive me. So, Ruth was not the only, Genesis was not the only place that this was actually brought up. There was also defilement in her land, like I spoke before, because of the way who and the way they worshipped. And so in Ruth 2, 1:15, she said, behold, thy sister is gone back to her people and under the gods. Return thou after thy sister-in-law. Strong's Encyclopedia says that the national deity of the Moabites was called Chemosh. And Chemosh was worshipped according to a Jewish tradition under the form of a black stone. Chemosh was known by the sacrifice, apparently, of children to him. This is in 2 Kings 3:27. Then he took his firstborn son, who was to succeed him as king, and offered him as a sacrifice on the city wall. The fury against Israel was great. They withdrew and returned to their own land. So, the Israelites and the Moabites do not have a good history. Can you imagine doing that to your own child? When I say worshipped according to Jewish tradition, I meant this is what was passed on from the Jewish people about what the Moabites were doing. I don't want you to think that was a Jewish tradition. Okay. So, Jewish people were very strict about who they could marry. So when she married her husband, her first husband, it says in 4, they took them wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. Ruth was the wife of Mahlon, whose name means sickly. Ruth 4:10. I have also acquired Ruth the Moabite, Mahlon's widow, as my wife, in order to maintain the name of the dead with his property, so that his name will not disappear from among his family or from his hometown. Today you are witnesses. Now this was spoken by Naomi, her mother-in-law. So Naomi knew that she was a Moabite, but because she had no more sons, this was basically her only way of getting another son, was to present Ruth. Now, initially, Naomi's told her, just go home. You know, go back to your father's house. He'll take care of you. You can find another husband, etc. But Ruth had lived with her mother-in-law for 10 years. She had come to love her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law was a wonderful, giving, loving person. I mean, she accepted these Moabites into her home and loved them, as you might say, anyway. So Ruth said, don't urge me to leave you or to turn back from you. Where you go, I will go, and where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. So her decision affected her place, her people, and her profession. We don't think of Ruth as having a profession, but it was a mother, a homemaker, only she was not a mother. While Ruth makes this decision, there's a very real problem that she is the Moabite woman. But hesed is a power word in the Bible and the most important word in the book of Ruth. It shows up 3 times. But the concept runs through the whole story and ultimately drives the action. For those of you who do not know what hesed is, it's forgiveness, it's loving kindness, it's all the things you would expect from God. It's all the things we're told that reflect his character. So she commits to a new land. And she commits to a new leadership. She is willing to submit to Naomi and to allow Naomi to guide her life. She's willing to give up all the old ways of Moab and to conform her life to the way people live in Israel. She is ready to make a dramatic change in her life. And I have to tell you, when people ask me why I think I should keep the Sabbath, and keep the food laws, and not celebrate Christmas, it's because I'm willing to give up the old ways of the United States to live in a state of mind of Israel. That's to make the dramatic change in my life. She committed to a new lineage. Well, I feel like when the Lord adopted me, because that's what he says he's doing, into his household, I have a new lineage. She wants to be part of a nation which she has married into. Well, I haven't married into it yet, but I have definitely been adopted into it. I'm betrothed. So she's ready to claim it, just like we should all be ready to claim it. She commits with no limits. I mean, she's like, where you die, I die. Where you buried, I'll be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if aught but death part thee and me. She's not going anywhere. When Naomi saw that she was steadfastly minded to go with her, then she left, speaking unto her steadfastly minded. So they were both into the decision making and were committed to it. As she insisted strongly upon going with her, Naomi gave up dissuading her anymore. Now, have you ever been in one of them arguments where you're like trying to get somebody to do something they just will not? Finally, you just sort of give up? Well, we all have had those conversations, and finally you just go, okay, whatever. You know, that's a horrible word sometimes. Whatever. Okay, let's look at Luke 9:57 through 62. And the reason I bring this up is because these are 3 would-be followers of Yeshua. And let's compare them to Ruth. "57. As they were walking along the road, a man said to him, I will follow you wherever you go. Jesus replied, Foxes have dens and birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. That makes no sense to us, does it? Because we don't live there. Well, if you were in that time, it would make sense to you. Basically, what he's saying is he does not have a specific home on earth. So if you follow me, you're following me all over the place, and like you're not going to be able to go home at night. He said to another man, Follow me. But the guy says, Lord, first let me go bury my father. Jesus said to him, Let the dead bury their own dead, but you go and proclaim the kingdom of God. So, was he really that committed if he just wanted to go off and do something else first? No, he was not committed. And Jesus knew that. That's why he said that to him. And then in 61, still another said, I will follow you, Lord, but first let me go back and say goodbye to my family. And then Jesus said, no one who puts a hand to the plow and looks back is fit for service in the kingdom of God. Do you understand that each one of these, he's becoming harder in tone to these people? And it's all because he doesn't want flash in the pan Christians. He wants Ruth. Hey, I'm going with you. Let's go. Got my whatever, so I didn't have much, but it's on me, and let's go. Let's do this. These guys all had something else they needed to do first. And that's not what... God doesn't want excuses. He wants action. He wants verbiage. Verbs, action verbs. When he was talking to the first guy who wanted to go, the second guy who wanted to go bury his father, we're going to call him the too slow follower. Do you know any of those people, the too slow followers? Because sometimes, and to be honest with you, I was a too slow follower, so I really understand this. You know, years in the church, years of being exposed to the Lord, years of it being talked about in my house, and yet I just sat and did nothing. That's the too slow follower. That's what they all were, really. Too slow followers. The Lord wants decision making. He doesn't want your decision making to be based on erroneous things. He wants your decision making to be based on the Word. And if you can base what you do on the Word and do it with, I don't want to use the word quickly, because quickly can be sloppy. He wants you to do it in a manner in which honors Him, but gets the work done. So as we know, in verse 19, they went until they came to Bethlehem. Isn't that an interesting city that they went to? Don't you think that's an interesting city they went to, Bethlehem? I did. Because you know what? Until I started doing this, I've read Ruth several times. But this was the first time it really, kind of thumped me in the head. Bethlehem. Okay. But, they arrive and they're like, is this Naomi? She must have looked rough, y'all. But she had had a rough life. Husband dead, boys dead, nobody to help her. In that time, it wasn't like you could go get your Fortune 500 job, because you went to college. All women were homemakers. There were few wealthy women who did more than be just homemakers. But for the most part, they were just homemakers. Yes. So the actual journey from where they were at to Bethlehem was like 70 to 75 miles, and they had to walk that in sandals. It was like northward up around the Dead Sea to Bethlehem, which means, of course, house of bread. Why couldn't it? Why wouldn't it mean house of bread? I mean, we all eat the word of the Lord, and we are full. What picture of a sinner who leaves their old life and makes their journey to the house of God, going on an upward path that crosses beyond the place of death, the Dead Sea? Have any of us done that? Have we ever taken a 75-mile walk in the heat? Because, it's kind of deserty there. She was committed. Now, Naomi had a relative on her husband's side, a man of standing from the clan of Amalek, who was his name was Boaz. Elimelech was Naomi's husband. Boaz was the third son of his father. Ruth 2:2-80. And Ruth the Moabite said to Naomi, "Let me go to the fields and pick up the leftover grain behind anyone in whose eyes I find favor." Naomi said to her, "Go ahead, my daughter." She went out, entered the field, and began to glean behind the harvesters. As it turned out, she was working in a field belonging to Boaz, who was from the clan of Elimelech. Just then Boaz arrived from Bethlehem and greeted the harvesters. "The Lord be with you. The Lord bless you." I'd be so thrilled if we could say that to each other out in public. I mean, I get God bless you all the time, or it used to. It's kind of drying up. You don't get that all much. Boaz asked the overseer of the harvesters, Who does that young woman belong to?" Kind of sounds kind of sexist now, but you know. He did not mean it in a bad way. So I don't want you, patriarchy. I read that a lot now when I read about things from naysayers about the Bible. They're always like, the patriarchy. Well, sorry guys, it's just kind of the way it is. The overseer replied, "She is the Moabite who came back from Moab with Naomi." She asked, "Please let me glean and gather among the sheaves behind the harvesters." She came to the field and had remained there from morning till now, except for a short rest in the shelter. So Boaz said to Ruth, "My daughter, listen to me. Don't go and glean in another field, and don't go away from here. Stay here with the women who work for me." Later, Naomi tells Ruth to go to Naomi tells Ruth to go to Boaz and lie at his feet. Ruth 3:9-9. "Who are you?" he asked. "I'm your servant Ruth," she said. "Spread the corner of your garment over me, since you are a guardian redeemer of our family." This is also a euphemism for covering a man's private parts. So it's also mentioned when Abraham sent for a wife for his son. Okay? So you have to understand that there are things in the Bible you don't understand completely, and the 16th century guys, they kind of cleaned it up. But this was like almost like a promise of a swear. When you did this thing, it was almost like this promise couldn't be undone. In connection to Boaz, there was a wedding in Ruth's life. So in Deuteronomy 25:5, this is a little bit of an explanation of what the Redeemer was. "If brothers are living together and one of them dies without a son, his widow must not marry outside the family. Her husband's brother shall take her and marry her and fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to her. The first son she bears shall carry on the name of the dead brother, so that his name will not be blotted out from Israel. However, if a man does not want to marry his brother's wife, she shall go to the elders at the town gate and say, 'My husband's brother refuses to carry on his brother's name in Israel. He will not fulfill the duty of a brother-in-law to me.' Then the elders of his town shall summon him and talk to him. If he persists in saying, 'I do not want to marry her,' his brother's widow shall go up to him in the presence of the elders, take off one of his sandals, spit in his face, and say, 'This is what is done to the man who will not build up his brother's family line.'" I would not want someone spitting in my face. In Ruth 4:13, Boaz chose to take Ruth as his wife. And when they did marry, the Lord gave her to bear a son. Now, before we get all starry-eyed about this young couple, according to the Midrash, Ruth was 40 years old and not a young woman when Boaz married her, a fact that stresses the urgency of her to marry and bear children, because women were judged on whether or not they could bear children in that time. This is out of Ruth Rabbah 4:4, BT Shabbat 113b. The Midrash puts Boaz's age at the time as 80. Ruth Rabbah 7:4, Ruth Zuta 4:13. So, yeah, you know, when we see these movies about them, they're always these young people. You know, it's not the elderly like Harrison Ford and the, I don't know any 40-year-old actresses. I think those are all run out of, you know, Los Angeles, aren't they? But anyway, you know what I mean. These weren't young people. It's not like there were just, and yet at the same time, we already know that Boaz must have been attracted to her because, you know, hey, stay in my field. Stay here and do what you're doing. And he was a compassionate man. The story parallels what our kinsman redeemer does for each of us at the point of salvation. That kinsman redeemer is Yeshua, Jesus. He is the one who rescues us from our lives, our loss, our grief, our bondage caused by sin. Now, Ruth was under the bondage of the sin of her forefathers. But, as I said before, God gave her Hesed. And she had lost a husband, and she grieved for him. She had lost her home. She didn't have any money. She was a completely displaced person. But Jesus, Yeshua, is the one who willingly paid the price for our deliverance and restoration, just as Boaz paid the price for Ruth's deliverance and restoration. The women said to Naomi, "Praise be to the Lord, who this day has not left you without a guardian redeemer. May he become famous throughout all Israel. He will renew your life and sustain you in your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and who is better to you than 7 sons, has given him birth." Then Naomi took the child in her arms and cared for him. The women living there said, "Naomi has a son," and they named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David. This is from Easton's Bible Dictionary, that says that Obed means serving, worshiping. Ruth becomes King David's grandmother. This is the physical manifestation of Ruth and Boaz's marriage. In the spirit, Ruth symbolizes a church that is married to Boaz, symbolizing Christ. Let's read Isaiah 54:5. For your Maker is your husband, the Lord Almighty is his name. The Holy One of Israel is your Redeemer. He is called the God of all the earth. And in John 3:29, the bridge belongs to the bridegroom. I'm sorry, not the bridge. The bride belongs to the bridegroom. The friend who attends the bridegroom waits and listens for him and is full of joy when he hears the bridegroom's voice. That joy is mine, and it is now complete. Now, I think that was a very interesting thing for Isaiah to say, because it was going to be a long time before Yeshua came. Makes you think maybe he did hear Yeshua's voice, and Yeshua talked to him. Now, he's talked to me. He's talked to a lot of people in this room I'm in right now, and if he's never talked to you, you need to pray more. Sorry, that sounds so harsh, but it's true. If you pray and listen with your heart, he will talk to you. John 10:18. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have authority to lay it down and authority to take it up again. This command I received from my Father. Yeshua moves in the requests of the Father. And the requests of the Father, not one of us would have done. We would have run from what Yeshua faced at the cross. Now, Boaz volunteered his life to be Ruth's husband, even though Ruth does not deserve Boaz because of Boaz's good reputation and good name, because her lineage is defiled. We've all got defilement in our lineage, in our lives, things we've done that we don't think can ever be wiped out. But Yeshua does that when he puts his blood on us. Amalek died without fulfilling his responsibility of providing good name and good reputation for his wife. Yeshua, represented by Boaz, fulfilled it for him. Does he not fulfill for us now and restore our good name and our reputations? Because our good name and our reputations come from Yeshua spiritually. Forgiveness of sins and healing, and not the sinful Adamic nature anymore. Do we still sin? Yes, we still have to repent. But the goal, which never moves, it will eventually get there, is to move more in his ways, to move more in the way that he wants us to live, to move more in how he wants us to be with one another. So how does this apply to new Christians? Well, all the characters in this book of Ruth, just like us, faced life's normal challenges. Death, moving, lack of financial resources, familial responsibilities. We find God weaving a story of redemption out of those details. The book of Ruth encourages us to view our day-to-day lives as part of Yeshua's bigger plan for our lives and world. You know, I've talked before about our orbit and how you influence your orbit. If you positively influence your orbit, you will find family members that come to Christ, family members that come to the way, family members who respect you because you've improved your good name through Yeshua's sacrifice. In our orbit, we also show people we don't know and friends how we've changed. I mean, those people know us better than we know ourselves. They can almost tell you how you're going to react to something they say. If you're going to laugh, if you're going to cry, if you're going to turn around and walk off, if you're going to say ugly words. But when Yeshua puts his blood on you and you are committed to his way, everything changes. Your personality changes. Not completely, because our personality is our personality. But I'm talking about when you think of something, okay, someone cuts you off in traffic. I'm sorry, Bill. I wasn't even thinking about you. I was thinking about myself. Because I got cut off in traffic one day, and I did not react well. And I said an ugly word in my own car with nobody else around. And then I went, I'm sorry, Lord. I do not wish to be negative and ugly anymore. I do not wish for someone to do something like cut me off in traffic and for my reaction to be my old self. I don't want to do that anymore. I want to be, that was not good of him to do, but you know what? I'll get over it. He did not kill me. He just did something I didn't like. Okay? I mean, this is my goal. This is my goal. I don't say I'm perfect. This is my goal. I'm just trying to explain that Yeshua has that bigger plan for our lives and our world. So we can't cling to, as the newsboys say, that bedrock sin. We have to get up and move on and knock the dust from our feet. And don't think that we have to wear the same pair of sandals we came to Yeshua in. We can take those off and put on a new pair that don't have the dirt of where we'd been previously. Wash those feet. One prominent theme in the book of Ruth is that of redemption, which applies to all of us. Ruth was a foreigner, childless, and a widow, which left her in complete poverty and no source of support. And we know a lot of people, or well, maybe we don't know a lot of people like that, but we know they're out there. Ruth faithfully accepted the gospel and joined the Lord's covenant people. Have you joined the Lord's covenant people? Because there's a difference between going to church and joining the Lord's covenant people. Nevertheless, Ruth faithfully accepted the gospel, and just like Ruth, we need to accept Yeshua's plan for us. His words, not only in the Old Testament, but also his words in the New Testament. The entire Bible is his plan for us. As my good friend Coleman Collins used to say, the Old Testament concealed is the New Testament revealed. You have to read both. You have to understand both. You have to get a little Jewish history under your belt. And then when you read the Word, you will find it opening up like a flower newly blossomed, smelling sweet, with the dew to wet your lips and your tongue and give you peace. Thank you.